very early days of the war on terror, members of the CIA and special operations teams were on the ground in Afghanistan seeking high-value members of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. In 2001, Gary Burnson commanded the CIA's so-called Jawbreaker team. Many of those captured by his team went to Guantanamo.
You know, when you look at Guantanamo, I think the public needs to understand that the individuals, the vast majority of the people that are there, 99% of the people that are there, were captured on a battlefield where they were conducting activities that were not consistent with, you know, legal warfare, human rights. They're genocidal killers. They were criminals and terrorists in many, many ways. They were taken to Guantanamo to be held so that they would not be attacking us again.
Which, for people who don't understand, which allows us to do what?
Well, it allows us to hold them as prisoners in a U.S. Compound outside the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. And by doing so, it allows us to legally keep them outside the bounds of the U.S. Constitution.
What's the fear with giving them constitutional rights and convicting them here and holding them in prison?
The problem that we have is that many of these individuals were captured on a battlefield. It wasn't a crime scene. It wasn't like the New York City Police Department coming into a location where a murder had been and they picked up a weapon and they had fingerprints on the bullets. You know, they had, you know, all of the aspects of a criminal investigation in a court of law. If an individual, according to the Geneva Convention, is not in uniform, doesn't have a designating patch, is not under the authority of competent authority, and is not following the rules of law, they're considered enemy combatants, and they can be executed on the battlefield. We did not execute them on the battlefield. We chose to instead bring them to a facility and held them. We have created a legal morass and an administrative nightmare in the holding of these individuals.
By being basically more humanitarian.
By attempting to be more humanitarian. But we should have brought those that we knew, like the 5 members of the Taliban. Those 5 individuals were members of a governing body that conducted genocide. They all should have been hung or shot. But they were released.
Who did you capture? What was your role on the team?
Well, in 2001, you know, I deployed teams, you know, several hundred miles behind enemy lines and captured key members of the Taliban. You know, one of the individuals, of course, was Sikh, the deputy chief of intelligence. He was then, you know, returned to the United States, was sent to Gitmo, and he and the other 4, who all played prominent roles, you know, Minister of Defense, you know, Minister of, Governor of Coast, Chief of Staff of the Army. These were really big players.
Tell me about those guys, the capture of those guys, some of whom were released, and what your reflections are on that.
Some of those individuals, of course, were captured, you know, had been members of the security forces, had been members of the security apparatus, and had, you know, actually been in charge of organizing, you know, stadium-size events where there'd be 10,000 men cheering. A pickup truck would drive in. There'd be 4 women in the back that have leashes on them. They'd drive around, everyone cheering. They would take them off, and then those women were executed in front of cheering crowds of, you know, Taliban.
For having done what?
For having purportedly cheated on their husbands, or essentially their husbands didn't want them anymore. And it said that they had violated Islamic law and they were being executed. Individuals that had been released from Guantanamo, at least 1/3 of the individuals who had been released have returned to the battlefield, have been confirmed to have returned to the battlefield. All of those individuals present a clear and present danger to the United States and its allies. They have a super ideology of jihadism, a knowledge of weapons and tactics, a history of having murdered people in cold blood, and an intense hatred of the United States and of our political system and our social system, and are committed to killing us and our families. And the United States' handling of those individuals at Guantanamo, you know, may seem to be harsh by a generation that didn't live through the conflict or was unaware of it, but really it has been very soft, and it's been a light hand, and I think it's a great mistake.
But we were told they wouldn't go back on the battlefield.
We were told they would not go back to the battlefield, and if anyone believes that, they're a fool.
You played a personal role in their capture or in directing the teams to capture?
Well, there were my teams that actually did the capture, but I'll say this. Had I known then what I know now, I'm actually just sorry we didn't execute them on the battlefield. I really am.
In 2014, the Obama administration released 2 of Jawbreaker team's captives in a swap for U.S. Army alleged deserter and Taliban prisoner Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. Bergdahl is currently on trial on charges of desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. Still to come on Full Measure, uncovering what the government doesn't want you to know. Some claim it's more difficult now than ever. We'll take a look at how Congress may help change that.